Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. By the end of this week, Donald Trump will have been president of the United States for a total of 6 months. If it seems like 10 years, that's because from a news perspective, there's been about a decade's worth of drama packed into a bewilderingly short period of time. Donald Trump has dominated virtually every story in America since the day he was inaugurated. Almost all of them have been hostile. Now, given that, it is amazing, it's remarkable how many of the people who voted for Donald Trump in November tell pollsters they still support him. How's that possible? Well, as Henny Youngman replied when asked about his wife, compared to what? Trump may be badly flawed, you could make that case, but the people who hate him have gone crazy, sometimes hilariously so. Here's the latest attack. Not only is the president an immoral Russian stooge, he's fat.
Is the president fit? And I want to read part of it. In the modern history of American presidents, no occupant of the Oval Office has evinced less interest in his own health. He does not smoke or drink, but his fast food, red meat, heavy diet, his aversion to exercise, and a tendency to gorge on television for hours at a time put him at odds with his predecessors. I mean, is this ultimately in keeping with a personality that is about a lack of discipline then? He not only takes golf carts in places on golf courses where they're not supposed to be, right? But he takes golf carts to places where, like, other world leaders are walking.
So the same media figures who told you it was sexist to ask about Hillary Clinton's health after she passed out in public, remember that? The same reporters who ignored Obama's Marlboro habit for years are now fretting that Trump doesn't spend enough time on the Stairmaster. Sitting in a golf cart is now a sin. But you know what's even worse than sitting in a golf cart? Sitting next to Vladimir Putin at dinner. Today, the press expressed shock that during an event at the G20 in Germany, the president voluntarily spoke to his Russian counterpart. Watch this.
I don't think there's anything normal about the president having an hour-long meeting with Vladimir Putin outside the presence of any American witness.
It is suspicious when the president appears to be coddling Vladimir Putin as he did as a candidate and now as president. This is Vladimir Putin. This is a dangerous game he's playing. He's not telling us about it.
Eating with equals coddling. Dangerous indeed. And not just for the country, but for the White House staff who could literally die because of it. Now, Louise Mensch, who's a former member of parliament in Great Britain, is now a major source of Russian news for American progressives, announced with great confidence this very morning that members of the Trump administration will be executed for their Kremlin ties. According to Mensch, who we're quoting now, my sources say the death penalty for espionage is being considered for Steve Bannon. I am pro-life and take no pleasure in reporting this. But it's not just Bannon who's in peril. According to Mensch, the president himself could be headed to the death chamber. Quote, the evidence against Donald Trump is SIG-int. It is recordings, audio, and visual. It is overwhelming. He may indeed face the death penalty. Now, keep in mind that just this spring, Louise Mensch wrote about Russia for the New York Times, the paper of record. What was just a year ago considered fringe and embarrassing is now regarded as totally mainstream among liberals. Can this get crazier? That's the question. Joining us now, a man who has made a life study of crazy, author and columnist Mark Steyn. So first to the president's fitness level. Is this, I mean, given everything that's going on, is this a legitimate critique, do you think, of the Trump presidency that he has no visible abs and too high a percentage of body fat?
Well, I think it represents his cultural offensiveness to his opponents. You'll recall that at one point when he was on the stump in Iowa, I think it was, Barack Obama said to his audience, have you seen what the price of arugula is today? As you know, Barack Obama
really
was
happen?
the first.
That's so good.
That did really happen. He was, in that sense, the first Arugulan American to be elected president. And he had he advised his people around him, if they wanted to have the burger, that they should take the salad. Now, I regard this idea of presidents ostentatiously jogging and working out as rather preposterous. I never saw Winston Churchill jogging, and it didn't seem to affect his performance. And if you recall, when Barack Obama was in Warsaw, he was surreptitiously filmed in a gym supposedly bench pressing, and in fact he was lifting dainty little £1 pound-and-a-half weights in a rather and groaning as he was doing it, lifting these. Oh, a pound! I've got the pound-and-a-quarter weight. I'll try and see if I can do the. Oh, I can't do it with the pound-and-a-half weights. I would much rather Trump, who is a man at ease with himself, and demonstrated on the stump that he had incredible energy. I mean, we all know Hillary Clinton lost because in the last 2 months of the campaign, she hardly campaigned. Trump had tremendous energy, he was flying all over the place, he was doing these campaign stops. This is a cultural issue. They want to force Trump into eating arugula and jogging because he represents in that sense, the other side of the cultural divide.
I think that's exactly right. He likes fast food and Three Musketeers bars, and that's deeply offensive to them. Now, Louise Mensch, I almost don't want to single out any one person because there are so many conspiracy nuts on the left right now. But Louise Mensch was a member of Parliament and a published New York Times author and kind of a serious person, I thought. And then somewhere along the line in the past year, she's taken to sending out statements like the one she did this morning that the death penalty is about to be applied to Steve Bannon. I guess 2 questions. What happened? And second, how can she be taken seriously by mainstream figures in the press still, given that she writes stuff like that?
Well, because I don't think there's any level of derangement that is too far to go. Everybody throws around the word treason with relation to Trump and the Russians, and the penalty for treason is death. And if you think about it, the left isn't invested with that Taliban guy who was arrested shortly after capturing in Afghanistan, shortly after 9/11. They weren't interested. He was actually fighting with America's enemies in Afghanistan. But nobody wanted to hang that guy because treason of that kind isn't serious to the left. Whereas if you have tiramisu with Putin at a G20 banquet, you should fry for that. That's the position of the left now. And if you think about it, once you follow that path, that somehow meeting with any Russian, as you were talking about the other night, Tucker, if it's a crime to meet with any Russian, if it's treason to meet with any Russian, if the penalty for treason is death, then Louise Mensch is right and Trump is heading for the chair. That's the logic of where the left is on this.
But, I mean, I think you're younger than I am, but I think you're still old enough to remember when Russia, then called the Soviet Union, swallowed up half of Europe, was under a cloud of darkness and oppression. And I seem to recall for 70 years the left taking their side, making excuses for them, attacking people who attacked them. How did this happen? How did Russia become the enemy among people who always defended Russia?
Because in the end, as with all these things, the left's real enemy is domestic. So the left is quite happy to make common cause with Islamic radicalism when Islamic radicals have an objection to right-wing Americans. And in exactly the same way, they had no interest in Russia until it quite opportunistically served their needs in terms of getting Trump. As you say, throughout the... Where were these guys 40 years ago? 40 years ago, they were seriously arguing. In fact, somebody argued just the other day that they seem to think the Berlin Wall was the equivalent of the Mexican Wall, because to leftists, the purpose of the Berlin Wall was to keep West Germans from flooding inside and enjoying the benefits of life behind the Iron Curtain. And so we now have the... and the poor old East Germans had to build that Berlin Wall to keep all the Western Europeans from flooding into it. We all know how they were shot at Checkpoint Charlie. West Germans, Frenchmen, Italians trying to get inside the Warsaw Pact. That was what the left did at the time. Now they're saying that if Trump goes to a summit of world leaders and he's seen talking to a world leader, then that is somehow treason, and that guy is headed for the chair.
Well, the weird part is that the health care initiative just failed, at least for the moment, yesterday. And you can lay part of the blame on that at the White House, I think. I mean, there are cases you could make against the Trump White House, but they're not making any of them. in favor of something that's so ludicrous that it humiliates them when they articulate it. I don't who's making the strategy over there. It's insane.
Yeah, because there's actually an interesting story here that Trump's main problem, in a way, is that there's a Republican Party, significant parts of the leadership of which have no interest in seeing the Trump presidency succeed. And in a sense, they're inflicting quite a lot of damage and obstruction on him. And you'd have thought that in itself would be an interesting enough story for CNN to cover. Instead, they're saying, oh, look, he went to the G20 summit and he was supposed to be sitting next to the Argentine First Lady, and he sat with her for 2 courses, and then in dessert he wandered over and he started talking to Putin. Can you believe that? The Russians are so deep into this guy that they've arranged to have a clandestine meeting at a world summit. You know, it's the equivalent of Prince William and Kate being seen talking together at their wedding. That's what it is. You go to the summit to meet Putin, and apparently that is now a conspiracy. There's actually a fascinating story here of what happens when an independent president, who in effect hijacks the Republican Party for his own purposes, wins over 17 candidates, takes the White House, and then finds that Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell somehow don't seem to be able to advance his policy in Congress. If we had a sane media in the United States, that's what they'd be talking about.
It's an amazing story. And by the way, it's not necessarily a pro-Trump story, but they're not reporting it because it's not Putin-related. It's demented, actually.
No.
Mark, thanks a lot for joining us, as always.
Thanks a lot, Tucker.
Thank you. All right, I've just been handed something, so I'm going to read to you right from this. This is an interview with the New York Times. The President of the United States apparently just did. Maggie Haberman and Peter Baker were 2 of the reporters. And in it, he was asked about the recusal of the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, formerly a senator from Alabama, and not insignificantly, one of the first members of the Senate to endorse Donald Trump in his bid for the Republican nomination. Took a huge amount of grief for doing that in his state and in the Senate, but he did it anyway. Mr. Trump, President Trump, was asked about his Attorney General, and here's part of what he said, and I'm quoting now. Sessions should have never recused himself, and if he was going to recuse himself, he should have told me before he took the job, and I would have picked somebody else. President Donald Trump about his own Attorney General. Now, it's possible there's context there we're missing. Certainly there are going to be follow-up stories to this, but it looks like a direct attack by the president on one of his first supporters and a widely respected man in Washington, the Attorney General of the United States, Jeff Sessions. We'll tell you more when we get it. And we have another Fox News alert. We have some sad news to report tonight, no matter where you are on the political spectrum. Senator John McCain of Arizona has been diagnosed with brain cancer. The cancer was discovered when McCain underwent surgery at the Mayo Clinic last week to remove a blood clot above his eyebrow. In a statement, the Mayo Clinic said McCain's underlying health is excellent, and they were reviewing treatment options, which would include both chemotherapy and radiation. John McCain, senator from Arizona, diagnosed with brain cancer tonight. We're sorry about that. Well, Sanctuary City fans say the policies of sanctuary cities are needed to fight crime, but a recent study found violent crime, in fact, plunged in the city of Phoenix after that city abandoned sanctuary policies. How does that all work? We'll discuss the evidence with the head of a pro-illegal immigrant group next. Plus, cops in New York say they've caught the MS-13 gang members responsible for a gruesome quadruple homicide we reported last April. We'll get an update on the fight against what may be the most dangerous gang in America. That's just ahead. Well, in the debate over sanctuary cities, a lot of the argument has centered on the question of crime. Do sanctuary cities encourage locals to cooperate with the police, thereby lowering crime rates, or do they simply halt the deportation of dangerous illegal aliens? That has been the argument. Well, some light has been shed on it by a couple of recent studies. One from the University of California at Riverside found no statistically significant gap in crime rates between sanctuary cities and law-abiding cities. In the city of Phoenix, meanwhile, the study found that crime fell substantially after Phoenix repealed its sanctuary city policies 9 years ago. Enrique Morones is the founder of Border Angels. It advocates on behalf of illegal aliens, and he joins us tonight. Enrique, thanks a lot for coming back on this show. We've had you a couple times. And one of the reasons I want to talk to you tonight is because science has weighed in on the conversation that you and I had about the effect of sanctuary policies on crime. You and a lot of others have made the case, look, if we crack down on illegals, they're never going to report crime to the police and crime will go up. Now we know that that didn't happen, and that in Phoenix, crime went down when the city stopped ignoring federal law. How do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, I don't advocate for illegals. I call people people. They're human beings. They're not illegal aliens or illegal human beings. And the fact that there's a
I'm not
study
saying
or
the
a
fact of being
situation...
human is illegal. I'm saying they're in the country illegally. People who are not allowed to be here.
Right, but they're not illegal aliens. They're people that have done
they're aliens.
act.
They're from foreign countries, and they're here illegally. Call them what you want. We're talking about the same group of people.
Well, I like to use humane terms. Now, but Phoenix is comparably the same size as San Diego, the city of my birth, the city that I'm in right now.
Right.
And San Diego, which is kind of, it's not officially a sanctuary city, it's a safe city, which is almost exactly the same. Here, crime has been very, very low. And law enforcement here, like overwhelmingly across the country, does not want, I'm talking about police and sheriffs, they don't want to act as immigration agents. They want to have trust within the community, like you have in San Diego, one of the safest cities in the country, the same size as Phoenix, except we're right next to the border. I was in Tijuana today, for example. It's only 15 minutes away.
No, I know.
It's one of the safest cities in the country.
I know where it is.
Yeah.
But let me just ask you this: Why is it that on the subject of illegal immigration, liberals want police to make the rules? I don't think you'd want cops to make the rules on stop and frisk or racial profiling. But when it comes to this, you're like, oh, the cops want it. In our country, the police don't get to make the laws. Lawmakers make the laws. And so the question is,
that's right.
Will the police carry out their duty to enforce the laws or not? And you're saying they don't want to. That tells me nothing. Should they or not? That's the question.
I'm not saying that they should make the policies. The policies, as you stated, are made in Washington. And that's why the overwhelming majority of the country did not vote for Trump, does not support Trump. No, he's unqualified, and look at the mess that he's making across the country. So what I'm saying is we should have humane policies. If you want to talk about law enforcement, talk to law enforcement across the country, get their feedback, see what they think. They're opposed to a lot of these policies.
Okay, they may be, and who knows why they are. Maybe political pressure, they don't want to do extra work, but it's not actually relevant to the question, either in general or in this specific case. I'm confronting you with social science that shows that sanctuary city policies do not make cities safer. And I just want you to acknowledge that science is real and that you were wrong.
I acknowledge that science is real, and that's why one study versus 10 studies, I'm with the 10 studies that say that just the opposite. Just the opposite.
No,
but you're using one study. I'm using studies from the Cato Institute, from the Pew Institute.
No, the Cato Institute study.
There's the Cato Institute. It came out, an article that came out in January in the New York Times.
I know the study you're talking about does
look
not
at the New York Times, January this year. The article is right there. Look at the Pew Institute. You weren't a fellow there. Pew Institute, you weren't a fellow there. They say the same thing.
Okay.
There's study after study that says this.
No,
so you can pick and choose one study or one case and use that as, like you often do. But let's look at the real numbers. Let's look at the overall situation, not only a few cases that are different from the rest.
Just for those at home watching, and maybe you don't have time, you're not an expert in this, let me just say, there are no studies of the kind you're referring to. They don't exist.
The
studies
Cato
that
Institute,
compare,
the Pew
no,
Institute.
that's not true. Studies that compare cities with sanctuary city policies and those without, and their crime rates, this is the only one I've ever seen, and I've looked into it. So, but look, are you saying that this study is wrong? And on the basis of what are you saying that?
I'm saying that the overwhelming majority of people that are undocumented do not commit crimes, are not criminals.
I'm not saying they do.
A citizen is 5 times more likely to commit a crime than an undocumented person. Let's look at solving the crime issue. Let's not be labeling people and blaming people.
Okay, then let me just
work
ask
on
you a
having
question that I always have. So you don't like the law, all right? There are a lot of laws that I don't like, a lot of laws I don't like. But I kind of have to obey them because, I'm a citizen and everything. Why don't you put pressure on your lawmaker, the congressman who represents you, the 2 senators you have, other elected officials in Washington to change the law? That way we could actually obey the law, but the law would be more to your liking. That's kind of how the system in this country works. Why not try that?
We are doing that. As a matter of fact, that's why California, the state, is considered a sanctuary state. The entire state.
California is not a country. It doesn't get to make federal law.
No, but it'd be the 5th most powerful country in the world if it was a country.
Right, but
so
that's
let's start
fantasy.
at home. So we start in San Diego.
Back to reality.
Then we start in California.
Okay.
Then let's go across the country.
No.
That's the way
you're
all
missing
these
it.
laws are made.
I get it. California can pass whatever laws it wants, but we're talking about federal law passed in Washington by the Congress. If you don't like those laws, I get it. but why not try and change them rather than ignore it? Otherwise, you might be sending the message that if you like federal law, you just ignore it. I mean, that's what you're saying.
We should be if somebody commits a crime, they should be arrested. No doubt about it. Donald Trump should be arrested for the sexual crimes he's committed, for example.
Okay.
He shouldn't get a pass. He shouldn't get a pass.
Okay, very good point. Really? Okay. But hold on. Wait, can you
no,
bring
so
it
I'm
back?
saying. So,
no, what you're saying is you want the law to be different. Why not try and change it? Or does every person get to decide?
We are working on that.
How about this? What if Alabama decided, you know what, we're sick of enforcing federal voting rights law? Would you say, go Alabama?
We've seen that in Alabama. We've seen that in Alabama.
I don't think we have
freedom riders and so forth. It's not in quite some time, but they're trying to change it again.
I mean, right now in 2017.
But a lot of those things really haven't changed. Well, look at Alabama today. We have a long ways to go in Alabama.
Right. I think I'm hit with a tidal wave of dumbness.
Look at product of Alabama, Jeff Sessions. Come on.
Okay.
No, I am responding to
Thanks,
that. We are
Enrique.
looking at
from the San Diego School of Debate. Meanwhile, New York police just arrested more than a dozen alleged members of the MS-13 gang. Up next, we'll talk to the Suffolk police chief for an update on what happened there. Plus, President Trump's border wall is not funded, maybe not even close to being funded. One Congressman, Steve King of Iowa, has a plan to fund it. Not from Mexico, but by taking money from an organization that probably shouldn't be getting federal dollars anyway. He'll tell you his plan coming up. Well, the war against the MS-13 gang continues in the state of New York. Today, federal prosecutors and local police announced the arrest of more than a dozen alleged MS-13 members. They say the group is responsible for a whole list of crimes, including the brutal murder of 4 teenagers last April who apparently had disrespected the gang. Overall, more than 170 alleged gang members have been arrested in Suffolk County, New York, since Attorney General Jeff Sessions visited there back in April. Timothy Sini is police commissioner for Suffolk County. He announced today's arrests, and he joins us tonight. Thanks a lot for coming on.
My pleasure.
For us. So tell us the scope of these arrests, what they mean, who these guys are.
This is a huge blow against MS-13. Essentially, the new indictment charges 3 criminal incidents. It's the quadruple homicide that occurred in Central Islip, which is one of the most brutal murders that we've had in Suffolk County. It also charges a murder in Central Islip in a bodega where an MS-13 gang member brutally shot another individual in the head right there in the bodega. And it also charges 2 individuals with an attempted murder, also a shooting. This is a great case. We were able to arrest over a dozen MS-13 gang members. We're going to keep the pressure on.
So, and I asked this because the gang was formed outside this country in Central America, and a lot of its members appear to go back and forth. What's the immigration status, do you know, of these guys arrested?
Sir, of the 8 individuals indicted in the unsealed indictment, those are illegal immigrants.
All 8 of them?
8 of the individuals indicted in the indictment that charges the murders are lack status. This is a gang that recruits illegal immigrants. They prey on their own communities, which makes them particularly depraved. And we are going to keep the pressure on here in Suffolk County. The hardworking men and women of the Suffolk County Police Department have done a terrific job. Since September of 2016, we've made over 230 MS-13 arrests of over 170 individual MS-13 gang members. We've brought 2 large RICO cases in collaboration with the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office, and we're working with the Department of Homeland Security to target active MS-13 gang members for deportation. As a result of those efforts, crime is down, and we're solving murders. So this is certainly we're certainly making great progress. We're going to keep that pressure on.
There's a huge debate nationally. We just had it in the last segment over federal role in law enforcement, especially when it intersects with immigration. Have the feds been helpful to you?
We have an outstanding relationship with our federal partners. This case could not have been made without the assistance of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, particularly the FBI Long Island Gang Task Force, as well as the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York. The prosecutors in that office have been absolutely terrific. We also have a great working relationship with our local police departments throughout Long Island, as well as the Department of Homeland Security. In order to eradicate a gang like MS-13, you need true collaboration. You need collaboration among law enforcement agencies in the same jurisdiction, but most importantly, you need collaboration with law enforcement agencies outside your jurisdiction, because as you noted at the outset, this is a gang that moves around. It actually started in L.A. And then was grown in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. First started on the West Coast, and in the past couple decades, they've developed themselves on the East Coast, and we have to make sure that we're all sharing intelligence about our MS-13 gang members. The name of the game is intelligence.
Yeah, and a lot of these guys shouldn't be here in the first place, as you noted. Thanks a lot for joining us, Commissioner. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, a few years ago, back before humor was banned, people used to make jokes about the WNBA. We're not going to do that tonight, mostly because, as we said, it's no longer allowed, and we don't want to face the consequences. But instead, we'd like to congratulate the league for finally taking the lead in something in the ongoing infection of professional sports by silly political fads. On Tuesday night, the Seattle Storm engaged in a special promotion in solidarity with Planned Parenthood, the country's largest abortion chain. Every fan in attendance received pink signs and bandanas to pink out the arena. $5 from every ticket was donated to Planned Parenthood, which, by the way, already consumes $500 million of your tax money every year. Promotion was a huge hit. The team managed to sell out 49% of the arena. Storm player Sammy Whitcomb said the promotion was important because, quote, all women and girls deserve to feel respected. True, of course, those who are born anyway. Speaking of Planned Parenthood, Republicans in Congress still haven't defunded that group, despite repeatedly promising to do so back when Obama was president, maybe several hundred times. Back then, the GOP said they would, but they haven't, and they haven't kept their promise to rebuild the wall either. So, is another broken promise really surprising? That's the question Steve King of Iowa has asked himself. He has proposed this. Take away Planned Parenthood's funding and use it to build a border wall, a combination designed to offend progressives. Does he mean it? He joins us tonight. Congressman, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks for having me on.
So this is like a fever dream in Santa Monica. You're going to take away the Planned Parenthood federal subsidy and use it to build a border wall.
Well, you know, it's a simple solution to a complex problem. And sometimes people will say 2 birds with 1 stone. It's about that. It might actually be the whole flock with 1 rock if we could do this.
Do you have security?
Well, I don't want to answer that question for fear someone will figure out how to crack my security. So I feel pretty safe around this town.
So what kind of response has this idea received?
Well, there's been a lot of pushback from the liberals, and I know that our leadership will often make a comment about, is there any kind of a Twitter storm surrounding you today? But I think it's important for us
to... Wait, so Republican leadership's not embracing this idea?
They didn't embrace it right away, but, you know, they're a little slow to come to these new ideas.
Kind of weird, though, since I remember, at least a year ago, the leadership was saying, we want to build a wall and we want to defund Planned Parenthood. You've provided a way to do both those things simultaneously, and yet they're not congratulating you or buying you a beer?
You would think that they would say, boy, why didn't I think of that? Let's do that right away. And, you know, another thing on this is that the Planned Parenthood proposal, if we can even get this done, is only for a single year instead of in perpetuity, which is what I prefer. But it's worth $500 million. And the Planned Parenthood's government funds run about $554 million a year. And if we would just take that first $500 million out of there, apply it to the wall, and by the way, the wall is way overpriced. We can build that for $10 billion or less, and I've spent 42 years in the construction business. I'm not interested in building it myself, but we could do that. So there's a start on it. And when you look at the rest of this, another thing that caught their attention was the SNAP program, or the food stamp program, as we've long known it. And when you look at the numbers of that, it's just astonishing. When I came to Congress in 2003, there were 19 million people on food stamps. And that number elevated all the way up to 47 million. It's dialed back down to around 46 million now. And 40% of them are obese. And so we addressed the food stamp program under Lyndon Johnson starting in about 1962. We got the program in 65. And back then, 13% of our population was obese, and we were trying to solve the malnutrition problem. Well, we've absolutely solved the malnutrition problem, and now we have an obesity problem contributed to by the SNAP program.
There's some perverse and unintended consequences. So, to the wall, if there's one thing the president ran on, I watched it, it was building the wall. We're going to build the wall, a big, beautiful wall. This campaign was not run on, I don't know, cutting Medicaid. It just wasn't. So why, you're a truth teller, tell us why it hasn't happened.
The wall itself.
Yeah, why hasn't the Congress moved, separate from everything else, to fund and build the wall that their leader, the president, promised repeatedly during the campaign?
All Democrats oppose it.
Yeah.
The never-Trumpers who don't announce themselves oppose it. And they've been looking for other ways to try to describe it. And it's been pulled down over and over again in a lot of different ways. I keep making the argument that a wall is a wall. It's concrete in the mind's eye of the American people that voted that mandate in to support Donald Trump. It's not a balloon, it's not a drone, it's not a wire, it's not another patrol, it's not a virtual anything. It's a wall. And
that's what was promised.
That's what was promised.
And you know, policy ought to flow from election results because it is a representative democracy. Do you think the Speaker is for the wall?
I don't believe the Speaker is for the wall. At least he's way short of the enthusiasm that I have for the wall. But he has said to me, back at least as recently as January, that we need to give the President the resources he needs to secure the border. And when I hear that, that tells me build the wall and put the appurtenances on it that are necessary to make it effective. But I don't see that being pushed. But on top of that, though, you saw the White House ask for $1.6 billion in the upcoming 2018 budget year. And that's a start. But if they were serious about this, I think there would have been a $5 billion ask rather than a $1.6
I mean, I think the reason people on the wall anyway is because they didn't believe any of this border security stuff. And a wall is not the perfect solution, but it's a permanent step. You can't sort of pull the wall down when the administration changes.
That's right. And one other way to say it is walls don't have prosecutorial discretion.
That is another way to say it. Congressman Steve King of Iowa, it's great to see you.
My pleasure. Thanks, Tucker.
A horrible murder in New York. A homeless man claims it was self-defense when he shoved another man in front of a subway train. A jury believed him. Really a remarkable story. Looks like a man just got away with murder legally. We'll talk to a criminal defense jury who sat through the trial. Plus, Jane Sanders is suspected of committing bank fraud, but she says the real reason she's under investigation, you guessed it, is sexism. We'll explain that charge. Stay tuned. Well, a homeless man, a refugee from Sierra Leone who came to this country, has gone free in New York after a jury there decided that he acted in self-defense when he shoved a drunk man in front of a subway train. This all began in 2012. Naeem Davis, who moved here, as we said, from Africa, shoved Kaisuk Han, also an immigrant, into the tracks and then watched as a train arrived and crushed him to death and then walked off as if nothing had happened, went upstairs and began begging again. After being arrested, Davis claimed he was acting in self-defense from the menace of the much smaller man. The jury apparently believed him. They acquitted Davis yesterday. Jonathan Rosenberg is a criminal defense attorney. He was there. He wrote a piece about this in the New York Post this morning, and he joins us tonight. Jonathan, thanks a lot for coming. So, to those of us who weren't at the trial and are just looking at the facts, a much larger man murders another, admits it, clearly feels no remorse at all, does not report the crime, and then gets acquitted. How did that happen?
Well, thank you for having me. I think he could have done a lot more, right? He could have walked away. He could have called cops. He could have, I mean, there was no gun to his head. There was no fist to his face. No reason he couldn't have gotten rid of the situation without violence. And I think what happened was the jury emotionally decided the case as opposed to applying the legal standards to the facts. And that was the problem. It was not a justified killings, so to say, in New York. And unfortunately, the jury got it wrong in this case. And that's an opinion that we can have, though we have to follow what the jury says. They're the law. Once they make that ruling, that verdict.
Yeah, I'm not going to try to arrest the guy, but I mean, I have a right to be shocked and upset by it, just reading the newspaper account that the jury forewoman, who's some academic in New York, hugged this man after reading the verdict. Have you seen anything like that before, and what does it suggest?
I think it's unusual. I don't know if it suggests anything in particular. Maybe she felt, I mean, I don't know how she felt. Maybe she felt very happy about the verdict. She has a right to hug the guy. Afterwards, her service is over. I can't attack her on her own personal life in that situation.
Well, and I'm not suggesting anything about her personal life. I'm suggesting a level of emotional involvement that may have clouded her judgment, I guess, because I couldn't, in reading this, understand how you could be. I understand people get in fights and sometimes someone is killed. That happens a lot, and neither one involved is a bad person. But to watch a man get crushed to death by a train, do nothing to help him, and then just walk off as if it's no big deal, seems to me evidence of, I don't know, bad character for a start?
Yeah, I think it was a depraved murder. I think, at the very least, it was negligent homicide. And I think in defense law, it's very important that defense attorneys, for their own credibility, when they're not on the job, say this is a case of guilt, right? Because the more we understand guilt, the more we understand how to defend people who are innocent. We can't do our jobs effectively as criminal defense lawyers if we don't look at the cases and say this person was guilty. This person.
No, I think that's a smart rule to live by. Jonathan, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you for your time.
Well, a woman in Saudi Arabia narrowly avoided punishment for the grave crime of wearing a skirt. That still happens there. Is that the weirdest story of the day? We will decide in our Top That segment. Stay tuned. I want to bring you back with a Fox News alert. Senator John McCain of Arizona has been diagnosed with brain cancer tonight. The senator underwent a procedure last week at the Mayo Clinic to remove a blood clot, and during the surgery, doctors discovered that tumor. Well, we're joined by Fox News national correspondent Ed Henry right here on the set.
Well, Tucker, good to see you. Obviously, a lot of people in Washington, all around the country, around the world, thinking and praying for Senator John McCain tonight as they get this news. Our own colleague, Meghan McCain, from here at Fox News, of course, daughter of Senator McCain, has just put out a very emotional statement. I want to read it. She says, quote, "The news of my father's illness has affected every one of us in the McCain family, my grandmother, mother, brother, sister, and I have all endured the shock of the news, and now we live with the anxiety about what comes next. It is an experience familiar to us, given my father's previous battle with cancer, and is familiar to the countless American families whose loved ones are also stricken with the tragedy of disease and the inevitability of age. If we could ask anything of anyone now, it would be the prayers of those of you who would understand this all too well. We would be so grateful for them." This is from Meghan McCain. She adds, "It won't surprise you to learn that in all this, the one of us who is most confident and calm is my father. He is the toughest person I know. The cruelest enemy could not break him. The aggressions of political life could not bend him. So he is meeting this challenge as he has every other. Cancer may afflict him in many ways, but it will not make him surrender. Nothing ever has." Meghan McCain concludes that, quote, "My love for my father is boundless, and like any daughter, I cannot and do not wish to be in a world without him. I have faith that those days remain far away, yet even in this moment, my fears for him are overwhelmed by one thing above all, gratitude for our years together and the years still to come. He is a warrior at dusk, one of the greatest Americans of our age, and the worthy heir to his father's and grandfather's name. But to me, he is something more. He is my strength, my example, my refuge, my confidant, my teacher, my rock, my hero, my dad." A very emotional statement from our colleague here at Fox, Meghan McCain, tonight, daughter, of course, of Senator John McCain, a public servant who, I mean, Tucker, to say that his public service is about time in the Senate and chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee would be obviously a vast understatement. A man who served this country with such heroics, particularly during the Vietnam War, prisoner of war. So,
whereas,
all of us
as you were reading Meghan's statement, we got statements from basically every American political figure of note still alive saying the same thing. And I will say one thing. I spent a year with McCain once. Whatever you think of his politics, truly a tough man, for real. That's not. And
as Meghan laid out, he was not scared by his captors in Vietnam, and he's going to take on this challenge just like he's taken on every other challenge in his life.
Amen. Ed Henry, thank you for that.
See you,
I appreciate it. We'll be right back. Time now for Top That, where our panel does its best to settle once and for all the weirdest story of the day. Always many to choose from. Today, no different. Our panelists, Catherine Lyons, managing editor at Famous DC, and Katie Freitas, managing editor at Olympic Media. Welcome to you both.
Thanks.
Here's the first story. A woman in Saudi Arabia detained by police there after an online video showed her, brace yourselves, walking around in a miniskirt with her hair uncovered, both obviously unacceptable in the land of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Surprised?
Yeah, I mean, these are the issues that the feminists should be talking about.
Oh, there you go.
Why aren't they marching for women in countries that, you know, they can't represent themselves, they don't have rights? Where are the...
Because that doesn't get you headlines.
Well, I mean...
And it's boring.
Maybe they should try it out.
Or a federal subsidy of $500 million a year like Planned Parenthood gets. But I mean, like, if you sincerely cared, I'm not much of a feminist activist, but, you know, I've got a bunch of daughters, I love women. This is like outrageous. Well, I wonder why you don't hear statements from now to that effect.
Well, and you absolutely should, because it is a big deal. And my concern is that this woman, the video was leaked without her permission, apparently. Something bad could happen to her. This wouldn't be the first time that something like this has occurred, and then someone attacks that woman based on their beliefs.
Yeah.
So, you know, you're worried about her safety. You're worried about a lot of things. And again, no one's saying anything about this, and they should be.
Plus, that's the most restrained outfit I saw today in Washington. All right. Speaking of disgusting, snails are gross. Now, women are using them to grow more beautiful, supposedly. Using snail slime as a skincare product has been popular for years in other countries like Korea. Now it's taking off here. Cosmetic shops around the country offering more and more snail products. Ugh. What do you think of that?
Excuse me while I throw up in my mouth.
Would you put snail slime on you?
You know, no. I think this is, well, I wouldn't say no, but...
Good answer. Never say no.
I'm on the record here, but I think that people are starting to make things up now. I just want to meet the person that saw a snail and said, you know what, I'm going to put this on my face and see what happens.
It's like this is the first person who ate a pineapple. Do you know what I mean? It's like, who is that person?
And, yeah.
But would you, if you knew that snail slime was the key to youthful vigor and beauty, would you...
Oh, well, I mean, now that I've hit 25 and everything's downhill from here, like, yes, I would lather it all over my face at that point. But honestly, I'm going to stick to eating snails as opposed to putting their snot on my face.
I think that's a good call. Okay, what's the weirder story? Snails,
snails.
Snails or Saudi?
Snails.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to disagree with you both. People will do anything. They will inject botulism into their faces. Doesn't surprise me at all. The fact that nobody's saying anything about a Saudi woman getting arrested for wearing a skirt, weird.
Who's representing